Hey guys, Mr. Graves here, making another video. I promised I was gonna start the Unit 2 videos, so I'm gonna do 3 today. I'm gonna start first with the two-step equations video. So make sure I write this down as the title. So before we actually get into the video, you actually need to know a few things before you start solving two-step equations. The first thing you need to know is the difference between a variable and a constant, right? So if something's a variable, that means it changes, right? And if it's a constant, it stays the same. Stays the same. So that's the first thing we have to understand. Second of all, a variable can be any letter, right? So any letter in the alphabet. So typically we denote variables with the letter X typically, but it's not uncommon to see things like A, Y, Z. So as long as it's any letter in the alphabet, we can use it. Now, constant is usually three things. It's usually it can be a decimal, right? It can be a whole number. And of course, we all know whole numbers are positive numbers and can be integer. And there can also be fractions. Okay. So it usually has those two things. So in the case of a variable, you can have something like 2x, and a constant will have something like plus 5 or minus 10.6, right? So to illustrate better, I am going to write an example of an equation. So an equation in the form of y equals mx plus b has three characteristics we need to look at. We have this right here, which is the m. That's the slope. And I'm going to talk about in a different video how to find the slope. But right now, we're just talking about solving two-step equations. I don't want to make this video go on too long. Then you have x here, and that's your variable. Okay. Your variable is also your unknown. So one more thing you have to know about variable, it's usually the unknown. We don't know what it is. It's the unknown. But of course, the difference is the constant. We know what the constant is of something. So in this one, we have our b, and this is our y-intercept. And the y-intercept is obviously when the function crosses the y-axis. But the y-intercept is usually also a constant. Okay. The slope m is also one more thing. Slope m is also the coefficient, and the coefficient is the number in front of the x. Okay, so hopefully that made a little bit more sense as I now begin to solve two-step equations. So now I'm going to go to a new page here. I'm sure I have the thing. All right, good. I got it. So two-step equations typically have two things you have to solve. Well, not two steps to solve a problem. So before I continue, in order to realize a two-step equation, we have to know about something called the inverse, right? And the word inverse just means do the opposite. So do the opposite operation. And of course, people say, what do you mean by opposite operation, right? What do they mean by opposite operation? So in order to understand that, we have PEMDAS to help you. Okay, order of operations. Operations. So order of operations, we have P for parentheses, E for exponents. We multiply or divide from left to right, and we add or subtract from left to right. So based on the order of operations, the opposite of multiplying and dividing go vice versa, right? The opposite of multiplying is to divide, and opposite of dividing is to multiply. Likewise, the opposite of adding is to subtract, and the opposite of subtracting is to add. So it's very important we understand how to do the inverse, because the inverse is way we undo the equation. So we're now in algebra. This is pre-algebra class. I know it says 8th grade, but it's pre-algebra. So you do have to know that the inverse means the opposite, and you have to simply do the inverse to cancel stuff out so that we get to our final answer. So let me do a few problems where I put that in practice. The first one I'm going to do is 6 is equal to a over 4 plus 2. Now, do not confuse this. This is the same thing as 6 equals a divided by 4 plus 2. Okay? It's the exact same thing as a divided by 4 plus 2. Because there's a fraction, and fractions are the same as dividing. So I'm actually going to do both sides to illustrate how we're going to get the same answer. So the first thing I need to do is I need to focus on this plus 2, right? I got to get rid of him. And the only way to get rid of this plus 2 is to do the inverse or the opposite. So the opposite of plus 2 is minus 2. But what I do to one side of the equal sign on the right side, I'm going to do the same to the left side. So I'm going to subtract both sides by 2. Oops. And when I do that, this goes away completely. Please excuse the music in the background. So 6 minus 2 is 4. And then I bring down the other thing I have not used at all, right? I'm going to bring down on this side a divided by 4, or a over 4. So step 1 in red. Step 1, I do the inverse of plus 2, which is minus 2 to both sides. The second step now is I'm going to do the opposite of dividing, which means I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. Now, the reason I do that is I got to get rid of this 4 on the denominator. So I do that, it goes away. And my answer is going to be 4 times 4, which is 16. I'm finishing on both sides so y'all can see. 4 times 4, 16. Now, the cool thing about this is we can actually check our work to make sure we did it right. So to check our work, I'm gonna make it a different color. Check work. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna take the fact that a equals 4 and plug him back in. So let's say, and we'll say a equals 4. So 6 is gonna equal a divided by 4. We know. So if a is 4, it's gonna be. Oh, I forgot about the plus 2. Let me add the plus 2. There we go. Plus 2. So 6 is going to equal 4 divided by 4 plus 2. Oh, no, sorry, it's not 4. It is not 4. I'm sorry. Wow. What's wrong with me today? It's 16. What's wrong with me? Man, that's ridiculous. There you go, 16. So I do my math. 6 is going to equal 16 divided by 4, which is 4. And 4 plus 2 is indeed equal to 6. So our work checks out perfectly fine. Now let's do another one involving a different set. Change the colors here. I'm doing that set of problems. Let me do, to erase that guy actually, but that's a different story. Let's do 9x minus 7 equals negative 7, right? Negative, that's supposed to be a negative sign. I have to go in here and erase that little bit. There we go. So the first thing I'm going to do, in fact, let me go back to my other table. I forgot to write my second step down like a complete moron, right? So my second step in green was I ended up just multiplying both sides by 2. So I did the inverse of dividing by 4, which just means I multiplied both sides by 4. Okay, so on this one, I was working on if I got distracted. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do the operation here of minus 7. So the first step, okay, is I'm going to do the inverse of -7, which means I'm going to add 7 to both sides. Now, in this case, I did that, and this goes away completely. I bring down my 9x. Now, here's where it may get a little confusing for some of us. If you noticed, very quickly, I have a -7, and then I also have a +7, right? Looks like the positive scored 7, right? And then it looks like the negative also scored 7. So right now it looks like it's a tie. And anytime we have a tie, it's going to be 0. Hopefully, again, that makes sense, right? I had -7 plus 7. So since the numbers are the same, but the signs are different, it cancels out to be 0. Now, my second step I'm going to do. Second step is I'm going to do the inverse of 9 times x. So if I'm doing the opposite of multiplying by 9, I'm going to divide both sides by 9. And when I do that, x will equal 0 divided by 9, so x is equal to 0. And the greatest thing again, like I did before, I can check my work. So I'm going to check my work, which know x is equal to 0. So I'm going to do 9x minus 7 should equal -7. So I replaced x with 0. 9 times 0 is 0. And 0 minus 7 is indeed -7. So this work checks out perfect. So those 2 steps. For the second problem, I did the inverse of -7, right? Which is adding 7 to both sides. And then I did the inverse of 9 times x, which means I divide both sides by 9. Let's do another one. Another one that's more complicated. And this will be the last one I do because I have one more I can do. Yeah, I can do 2 more. But first, let me focus on. Oh, come on. There we go. So let's do -1 here is equal to 5 plus x all over 6. So this is the same thing as I'm going to write it on the other side as saying -1 is equal to 5 plus x divided by 6, right? Same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and draw the lines on both sides. Yeah, it doesn't hurt to do that. There we go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply both sides by 6. So that's my first step here. I'm going to do the inverse. The inverse of dividing by 6. So when I do that, this goes away completely. Remember, when I do the one side, I must do the same to the other side. Oh, crud. There you go, times 6. And now, goes away here. Now I do my math. 6 times -1 is -6. And of course, some of you guys are going to say, why is it -6? I'm going to show you shortly after I finish both sides here. So there's a cool little trick I like to show. It's called tic-tac-toe 3 in a row. So let me make sure. Oops. I shouldn't have done that. There we go. So I have my tic-tac-toe right here. I'm gonna go ahead and do my pluses 3 in a row. Then I'm gonna put a minus everywhere else. As you can see, for our problem we did here, I had a positive times a negative. So that's a positive times a negative, which gives me a negative as my answer. You can use this little tic-tac-toe table I did here for specifically, multiplying and dividing integers. So I think that's pretty cool. That way you guys don't have to, do everything, remember everything. So basically, if you look at the little tic-tac-toe table, whenever the signs are different, it's going to be a negative answer. But whenever the signs are the same, like you have negative and negative, you get a positive, and a negative times a positive is a negative. Now, my second step is I'm going to focus on the opposite of this positive 5, right? So my second step is I'm going to do the opposite. So do the inverse. Of positive 5. So I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides. And when I do that, this goes away completely. So negative 6 minus 5 is negative 11. You're going to ask, well, how do I know it's negative 11, right? How do I know it's negative 11? I can't trust you with that answer. So again, I'm going to come up here and write negative 6 minus 5. Do all my tic-tac-toe signs, right? Negatives. Seems like the negatives scored twice, didn't they? You have a negative 6 and a negative 5. I have absolutely nothing for the positives on this. So obviously, you're looking at this, two negatives, negative 6 and negative 5. Negatives are winning by 11 in total, which is why my answer is X is negative 11. Do I even have space on here to check my work? I can try. Let me try to check my work on this one. So I do check work. The thing about working on an iPad, you only have so much screen. Even this iPad is a freaking 13-inch screen. It's still not big enough, I feel. So if I plug everything in, I should have negative 1 is equal to, oh, lovely. It's not ready to be, I just got an email that the video I did today is ready to be uploaded for us to view in class. Divided by 6. So we know X is negative 11. So negative 1 should equal 5 plus negative 11 divided by 6. So negative 1 would equal negative 5 plus negative 11 is negative 6. Divided by 6 is indeed negative 1. So our work checks out perfectly. This has been a long video, longer than I planned. Oh my God. All right, so I have one more example to do. I want to make sure I'm very thorough on this. There's one more example I need to focus on, and it involves something called the distributive property. Let me just go ahead and talk about the distributive property first. I cannot assume everyone knows everything. Distributive property. So distributive properties, like, so say if you have like a 2 and then you have 3 plus 4. Well, a lot of y'all, to solve this, you'll say, oh, I can just do 3 plus 4 in the parentheses first, which is 7, right? And here we have 2 times 7. Anytime you have a number next to a parentheses, it means you multiply, and that's 14, right? So you get that. That's the easy stuff, right? So now, what if I say you can get the same answer doing it a little bit differently? So by distributing here, I'm going to take the number on the outside and multiply times what's on the inside. So I'm going to do 2 times 3, right? And then I'm going to do 2 times 4, right? Plus 2 times 4. I know 2 times 3 is 6, and 2 times 4 is 8. And 6 plus 8 is still 14. Look at that. You get the exact same answer either way. So the distributive property is just another more elaborate way to show you that even though you group a number on the inside and you multiply it on the outside, you can still take that same number on the outside and distribute or multiply it times what's on the inside, like I did with 2 times 3 is 6 and 2 times 3 is 4. Now I'm going to go ahead now, and I am going to go on ahead here and do one with distributive property. So I'm going to have 2 parentheses n plus 5 is equal to negative 2. Yeah, negative 2. So Step one, distribute, right? That's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to distribute. So 2 times n. Anytime you multiply a letter and a number, you put them together. So that'll just be 2n. Then I'm going to do 2 times 5, which is 10. So now we have a little bit of a little set of a different problem. Now we have 2n plus 10 is equal to -2. And I'm going to show you another way to solve this one. It's actually it's not as bad as they think they'll say it is. Now I'm going to focus on this right here. So my second step is I'm going to do the inverse of plus 10, which is minus 10 on both sides. So when I do that, this goes away. So 2n is going to equal -2 minus 10 is -12, right? And then my final step, step 3, is I'm just going to do the opposite. So do the inverse of 2 times n, which means I'm going to divide everything by 2. So when I do, n is going to equal -12 divided by 2. So n will equal -6. And I am done. The cool thing about this problem, you can also solve it another way. So let me just go ahead and do it the other way. So you had 2 parentheses n plus 5 equals -2. If you just went ahead and just say, you know what, I'm just going to divide both sides by 2. So leaving with n plus 5 is equal to -1. Then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides. So n is equal to -1 minus 5, so n is equal to -6. So you have 2 ways to work it, right? You can do it this way, where you do the 3 steps, you distribute, you do the inverse of adding 10, and then you do the inverse of 2 times n, or you can just simply divide everything by 2, and then just subtract by 5, and then just subtract 5. I prefer the second way better, but I have to show you both ways as your teacher. And that is the end of this video, okay? Again, if you need me for tutorials, you guys know you can book me from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Thursday, okay? All right, take care, all right? Bye, guys.